Le Magnifique!
C'est le Reverb.
Beautiful. Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello. The long-awaited reverb show. As you can see, we've got some very, very lovely, genuine spring reverbs on the pedal board.
Yeah.
But before we get into it, some keeping du house.
Indeed. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Also, massive thank you to anyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and merched ye up landlord.
Yes.
Currently, 'tis the season to be hilarious. So we've got some awesome Christmas merch in the shop at the moment.
Also, thatpedalshop.com, also patreon.com/thatpedalshow if you want to support us in that way. Thank you. Right. This came about... Well, let's start from the top. Dan and I both love reverb. On a scale of 1 to 10, Dan, how much do you love reverb?
I love reverb, like many tens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These ones go to 11.
Yes.
We love reverb. The sound of reverb that we've grown up with, that we have grown up with, is the sound of springs in a tank in a guitar amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
And in our lifetimes, and certainly in the recent past, over the last 10 years perhaps, the growth of digital reverbs is a thing.
Yes.
It's a different thing, and we're not getting into that today. What we're talking about is what if your amplifier doesn't have a lovely spring reverb in the way that this Fender Super Reverb amplifier does.
Yes.
It's what you heard over the introduction was the Super Reverb's reverb.
Mm-hmm.
Can you add that through a genuine spring? Because, Dan, would you agree, I've yet to hear a digital simulation of a spring that sounds and feels like a real spring?
Yes. And that's not to say that digital reverb can't sound amazing, because things like plates and halls and rooms... Unreal.
Totally on it for that stuff.
Unreal.
Completely down with that.
But spring reverbs is very, very difficult to get right.
Yeah. So we're going to kick off with a super reverb, and we're going to hear all of these reverbs into the front of that amplifier. So it's set with plenty of clean headroom. We've got a distortion pedal on here, a very posh distortion pedal, overdrive and fuzz, so that we can drive into the reverbs. And then once we're done with that and we've decided where we are, the reason I started looking for these things in the first place was because I recently acquired an amplifier that doesn't have reverb, but it also has overdrive in the amp. So the second part of the video will be to plug that amplifier in. It will be a Two-Rock TS1, and we want to hear these reverbs in the effects loop.
Yeah.
Because that's a question that loads of people have, like to run the amps gainy, no good in the front, or at least it's a different thing in the front.
Yes.
We want to do the effects loop. So let's just kick off with them straight into the front of the Super Reverb. For those of you who are fans of Super Reverbs, this is might be late 90s, early 2000s reissue. Mm-hmm. It's on 3. It's just set pretty clean. It's not overdriving at all. Sounds like this. You've heard it with the Strat. Sounds like this with the Telly.
It is the most incredible sound.
It's magic.
It truly is.
It's a beautiful sound. Okay, so we'll turn that off because we don't want to be listening to that anymore. And we'll get into the reverb pedals.
But what's interesting is that's the benchmark, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's today's benchmark.
Yeah, sure. But that's the thing, right? Because the sound of a spring reverb in an amplifier, so it happens after the preamp, and there's a separate gain stage in there to drive the tank, you know,
right.
And all of that is a part of that sound. So then it becomes, oh, right, well, this is, the gain staging wise, this is in a different spot.
Yeah.
This is before the preamp. So, you know, do we get like anywhere near that sound by going straight in the front?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning also that Fender for years did a standalone wooden box tube-driven reverb. We don't have one, unfortunately. It would have been really nice to have one, but we couldn't get our hands on one in time. That's a kind of a version of what's happening in the amp, because remember that the reverb tank that's sat in the bottom of that Super Reverb is driven and recovered using a valve.
Yes.
And if you crank it up, it will overdrive.
Yeah.
So we're taking all that away. None of these things have valves. They're all solid state circuitry, I guess. But they do all have, here are where the springs are. In the Surfy Bear, just in case you didn't know what it was. In the light pedal, this thing is the Ana Sounds, this pedal here, and that controls this spring reverb tank here. In the White Whale, there are springs, and in the Headroom, there are springs.
So many springs.
Everything here has real springs. Where do you want to start then, mate?
Well, let's start with the... shall we start with... I reckon we go left to right, only because the light pedal at the end has got
it's a different thing.
Stuff. So let's start with the Headroom. This is one that I've used for a long time. And there's a couple of things that I really like about it. I love the sound of the spring reverb in it, but I also love the fact that you can have two different settings that you can switch between, which is really cool. Okay, so... Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. Very much the sound of a small tank spring reverb.
Yeah.
I always think you can hear the, like in a long tank, which we'll hear in a sec, the reflections are smoother.
Yeah.
And in a short tank, you can almost hear the sound bouncing off the inside of the tank a bit more.
There's something about small tanks that I love. So remember when we were at TC in Denmark and we were doing some tone prints with Tor, and it's like, we did the C one and couldn't really nail that. Thought, let's do a small box spring reverb. And it's the sound of those reflections, those really tight sound of those reflections that we just couldn't get. It's something about the nature of the small box also projects forward a little bit further, as opposed to just being this big, massive ambient texture.
Not unlike a short delay in that respect.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan.
Well, in which case, let's stick with the short tank then. So what we've got on the Headroom is, as you heard, I was turning the tone up and down. I hope you could hear that over what Dan was playing, so that your repeats can be brighter and less bright. And that's the only control you have. So depth and tone.
Yeah. So yeah, the amount of reverb, the level of the reverb, and the tone, and that's it.
Yeah. So if we move to the ana sounds from there, then
Okay.
this is also a short tank, and as we mentioned before, it's this controller unit running this spring reverb tank, and that spring reverb tank is more or less the same as what you'd find in the bottom of an amplifier. What this gives us here are a bunch of additional controls. So you've got a mix control, the amount of hello, the amount of reverb mixed with the dry signal. You've also got low and high EQ, and there is also a kind of higher gain mode.
Right.
So just have a swing on this a sec. So you have this really far-ranging control, where you can drive the signal into that reverb really hard, so it starts to overdrive a bit, which I really like. I mean, it's kind of over the top, but. So that extra control is really nice. Sorry, this guitar's dying a bit next to Dan's telly. Let's up the ante a bit.
Nice.
Let's get some treble going.
Nice. It sounds massive.
For a small tank,
That's incredible.
It's quite a different experience than the Headroom, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so back from there, you don't have to be that crazy with it. You could turn the mix down and just get a nice, a nice light reverb.
That's fantastic.
Great, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It sounds the low EQ gives you that option to make it sound bigger.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. But if we turn the low EQ down a bit. the EQ, and that's fantastic. I really dig that.
So it just gives you a bit more control. We'll get onto overdrive in a minute. So next short tank one would be the White Whale then. In here there are genuine actual springs. There are genuine actual springs, aren't there?
There are genuine actual springs.
Much less control on here. We've only got dwell and tone, I think.
Right.
And mix. But you can choose between 2 and 3. Have a play.
So interesting that when you go between the 2 and 3 springs, you hear the third spring, you go, oh, it's so big and great. Why would you ever use the 2 spring option? But actually, sometimes when you don't want that largeness, and just having that little bit of poke, that's really cool.
I mean, I'm assuming that's what it is. It says 2 and 3 on the panel, so I'm assuming that's what it is.
Yeah.
Of course, the other great thing about the White Whale is you get the tremolo as well. So.
Go Gidget, go.
It's really cool. I think it's really cool. Finally, the light pedal. Bonkers out there from GameChanger Audio. It too has real springs in it, but it's also got an optical mode, so you can mix the spring reverb and the optical reverb, and then you've got a whole bunch of other shaping stuff, right?
Yeah, basically you've got a bunch of infrared sensors along the spring.
Of course you have.
Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? And the infrared sensors pick up the micro movements along the spring, and then they translate that into another reverb sound, so you can mix between the straight spring and the optical. And then you can add a whole bunch of other, tremolo and that sort of stuff into that. But for the moment, we'll have a listen to the...
Well, we might switch through some
We might, stuff.
Come on then. So moving on some distance away from a traditional spring reverb,
Yeah.
and extremely cool for it.
Yeah. I love that they've done it still based around an actual spring.
Yeah. So seeing as we've been through all of them, the question for me with the light pedal then, we know that all the others can sound a little bit like a really nice spring. Can the light pedal just sound like a really nice basic spring?
That's a great question.
Let's do that. We didn't actually run through the Surfy Bear yet, but you heard it in context there. I switched all of them on and off, and you heard the amp in the reverb come on and off. The audio will tell the story. There is something magic about the reverb in the amp.
Yeah, there is. And there's something magic about that absolutely ridiculous thing.
Yeah, so the Surfy Bear then, finally, is a long tank spring reverb. It's a take on that Fender black panel reverb, and it has some very useful controls. You saw me messing about with them there. The mixer again is the same as the mix on the White Whale and on the Anna Sounds.
Yeah.
The dwell is how deep the reverb, how long it lasts for. The tone, well, It's great.
It's sensational.
This guitar's got flat wounds on it, and I am really, really, really struggling to play it. So I know there's lots of people who love flat wounds on Jazz Masters, but I'm just so not used to it.
Right.
I'm all over
When
the
did they
place.
get put on there?
Simon put them on.
Like, so put them on both the guitars then?
Yeah.
Because they put them on the Jag as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's a great sound, but my fingers are feeling stuff they shouldn't be feeling.
Right.
Great. What's your favourite so far?
It's the Surfy Bear and the Headroom for me. The Anna sounds is amazing, and there's two things I love about it. I think it sounds incredible. I love that you can hide the spring somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you've only got that. But there's something about the tone of the Surfy Bear and the Headroom that I just think are exceptional. The simplicity of the Headroom for me.
Yeah.
The small box nature
small
of it
box.
is still winning for me. But hearing the Surfy Bear, and when we talk about the drip,
That's it.
that's what that's got.
That's it.
Rock lobster.
Yeah. Funnily enough, the Headroom is my least favourite
No way.
because it's the most effecty.
Oh wow.
Because
Okay.
you get that really, and if you want that effect,
Yeah.
it's
And I
really
love that.
cool. It's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
like an echo chamber.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah,
super cool, but I don't want that. I want a
Okay.
big, luscious, smooth.
I don't want that.
I don't want that. Because I've got this, and then you keep fouling.
Look at this little guy in here.
Yeah, all right. Let's introduce some overdrive then, courtesy of the Preamp Mark II from Chase Bliss, the Automaton. We'll just do that because the interesting question now is, if you drive overdrive into them, what happens?
Yes.
And we'll find that out. And then following that, we'll plug them into the effects loop with some overdrive happening in the amp.
Beautiful.
We'll pick up the pace a little bit now because we've heard them all, so
Yes.
we can do that. The Automaton is set up with a bunch of presets. Shall we pick something quite overdrivey?
Yeah.
Go
please.
on then. Have a play. See what you like.
That's the one.
That one?
That's the one. Splendid.
Did any of them seem to be caving into you? Did any of them seem to not have the headroom to pass that overdrive signal without?
No, not really. I thought they all stood up pretty well. I mean, the signal's not that hot. I think like the white whale seemed to handle it specifically, like extremely well.
Yeah. I think the short repeats in the headroom was making it seem to me like it was caving in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Which is why I asked you to turn it off and on.
Right.
But yeah, all seem to cope fine actually.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of gain coming from the preamp Mark II there, and a fair bit of mumbo too. Nice.
Very nice. Okay, shall we do the amp swap and hear them in the loop?
Let's do that.
Okay. And we're back in the room.
Two-Rock TS1, kind of a Dumbly overdrive special sort of thing.
Kind of. Sort of.
It's in the overdrive channel, and without any reverb on, it sounds like this. Don't worry about the key. If you're confused why the headroom switch is on there, it's because we've got a buffering issue, and it's quite interesting, and this is a whole thing about effects loops.
Yarp.
Listen to the volume difference between having a buffered pedal in the loop and no. So what you're going to get now is 40 feet of send and return cable.
Yes.
With no buffer, and then Dan will switch the buffer.
I'll just turn the buffer in from the headroom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hopefully shed some light on why Dan and I tend to stick away from effects loops, because the only way to get around that is to then buffer the effects loop. This one is, but then we don't like the sound of it. So we're going to leave it on, and there we are.
Okay.
Headroom then. So what's happening now is all the gain in this amp is being made in the preamp section pretty much. It's then coming out of the preamp section distorted, hits our reverbs, hits the power section, so the reverb should sound...
Fingers crossed.
Should sound good.
Amazing. Amazing.
What I'm quite pleased about is that none of the pedals are overwhelmed by the loop.
Yeah.
So the level in the loop is good,
Yeah. But now, this will be different from loop to loop,
of course.
of course, but the send coming in from that, because you've got a level control on that.
Yeah, just so you know, the send is not buffered, the return is.
Yeah.
So
But you can control the amount of signal that you're sending.
Yeah,
From
sorry.
that, which is really great.
let me just clarify that. The loop has send and return buffers on it. The send is turned off, the return is turned on.
Yeah.
Because we found when we turned the send on, it just got too bright and nasty, all the things I don't like about buffers.
Indeed. But they all sound great. They all sound great with the gain from the preamp.
Do you have a favourite? Have a play. See if any speak to you in a meaningful manner.
Speak to me.
I'll just stop proceedings there and say, when a guitar's turned down, you need the flipping loop buffered.
Right.
Because the guitar's not driving the capacitance
Yeah.
through everything.
Yeah.
Just listen to that for a sec. Dan, turn the guitar down and I'll just turn the buffered effects loop on and off.
Okay.
And you'll hear it clearly.
But as soon as the volume goes up, it's like,
So full volume, do you like it on or off?
off.
Do you?
Yeah,
Go on then,
yeah.
I'll play and I'll turn it off. Because we had to turn them all on.
I had to turn them all on. And I think that proves one thing, is that you need all of them. All of them, all turned on in one loop.
Could you discern anything during that? I mean, you were playing constantly. There was no trails to really be aware of, but could you discern anything?
Well, what was really impressive was that in that situation, they all worked really well.
Yeah. Like
the things that I liked about each of them was the same in the loop as they were in the front.
Okay.
You know?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What the first time through there was more reverb, and then the second time through I tried to make it much less reverb and darker sounding, so it sat back a bit.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. So in conclusion, trying to find a reverb that sits in the loop of that amp is causing a bunch of problems.
Right.
The way to solve it might be to not have... In the recorded audio, I'm going to suggest that a lot of you will far prefer the sound of the buffer on because it's brighter and more present.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is evened out in the recording process.
Right.
And in the room here, it sounds a little too crispy for our ears.
It's a bit crispy and crunchy, and there's no give.
So we're in that situation of where what gets recorded might not necessarily reflect what we're experiencing here. I think the solve would be to leave the send buffer off, the return buffer on, and use super crazy short cables. And I think that would...
If you're...
Although that said, it's going to be on all the time for me. It's never going to be off, so it doesn't matter so
much. And in
much.
that case, you just have it sat on the amp.
Yeah.
It's problem solved.
Yeah. But as to which one, it's really tough. I really like them all. I'm super impressed with the light pedal.
Yeah.
There's also some other business going on there because it gets fatter and bigger when you turn it on.
Yep.
Which may well be this.
Yeah, because you've got control over that dry level.
Sounds like there's a preamp in there too.
Well, that's it. That's
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they all have to have a preamp because they all have to be able to send the level through the transducers into the spring. So they've got to have a preamp to be able to do that.
And you could push the Surfy Bear's volume there as well to give you more of that.
Yeah. To be fair, for me, that's the best the Anna Sounds has ever sounded. It's always sounded great, but I thought it shined today.
Did you?
Yeah.
I like it. I love the way you've got that control. The sort of super crispy mode when the switch down is very much to taste thing. But there are situations where it's great. More often than not, I find that up position on the switches. It puts a load more gain through the reverb. I mean, the Surfy Bear is magic.
Yeah, it is magic. It is magic.
And I think if you were going, Dan and I aren't really into the whole surf thing, and neither of us can really play it, so you didn't hear much of that today. If you're going to go for that, there's only one choice.
Does that surf? I can do this to it.
There's only one choice, isn't there? It says it on the top panel.
Yeah, of course.
And that is absolutely amazing for that. I mean, the White Whale does it really well, plus you get the tremolo and it's in a small box. Makes a great deal of sense. Yeah, it's tough. That is tough.
I'll tell you why the Headroom works. I love it sonically, but if that was set on your amplifier, you can plug in a foot switch and switch between those two reverbs. So, you can go between having a really full-on, this is a reverb
I don't dig the super short, effecty sound of it. Do you know what, actually? I don't think a spring reverb is right for that amp.
Interesting.
I think a plate.
Yeah, wow.
Or a small room.
In the loop.
Is for my taste, because I've got amps that do that classic reverb sound, the classic Fender black panel reverb sound.
In some sense, it's always going to be compromised, right?
That's not what that's for.
Yeah.
And I'm more attuned to hearing a digital emulation
Sure.
of a room or a plate in the context of that sort of sound, because there's always going to be a little bit of delay on there as well. So yeah, that's interesting. Watch this space then, I guess. Sorry, it was a bit of a personal experiment today, but also give you a chance to hear these things side by side. Be fascinated to read in the comments which you thought you liked the best out there in YouTube land.
Yeah, indeed.
Once it all gets squashed and put out on the interweb.
They all sound the same.
Could you choose? Come on then, you got to choose one.
I'm still taking the Headroom.
Headroom, okay.
And in that context, it's not my favourite sounding. My favourite sounding is the Surfy Bear.
Yeah.
But I love having the option of having a couple of different reverb sounds. And it sounds, to me, the Headroom sounds great. The Surfy Bear sounds like phenomenal. But I thought they all sounded fantastic.
They did.
So there wasn't a duff in the bunch. They all sounded wonderful.
I'm having a practicality fight.
Okay.
Is what actually is happening. For me, the Surfy Bear is my favourite sounding. The Anna Sounds is excellent, but it is a faff.
It's a bit of a faff.
With the two boxes,
Yeah.
you've got to be really careful about where you put the tank, because it's susceptible to noise from your power supply and all that. Do you know what? I'm leaning quite heavily towards the light pedal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And what is it? Just sonically or just...
I think so.
Right.
But I don't know. That's enough of that. We're
Brilliant.
talking too much.
Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. A massive thank you to anyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and grabbed some merchandise, some t-shirts and pedals and strings and hats and the various stuff that's in the shop. It's the main source of income for the show and keeps us doing this stuff.
Yes, please go there. Thatpedalshop.com for people in the US and Canada. If you want to buy pedals, amps and accessories, please go to thatpedalshop.com. Patreon.com/thatpedalshow if you would like to support us in that way, for which we are very grateful. Thank you.
Indeed. Also for Patreons, we have monthly giveaways, and we also do a podcast of our VCA, Viewers, Comments and Questions.
ABCDEFG.
Indeed. And also our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe is...
Anderton's Music of Guildford in Surrey.
And our dear mates in Australia.
You know they've all turned off by now, don't you?
Yeah,
Let's see how many have.
Okay.
Pedal Empire of Brisbane, Queensland.
If you're still here, just give us a wave.
Give us a nod.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you on Monday for VCA. Bye. No, VCQ. VCA. Heavens.
That's a compressor.
Indeed.
Bye.
Bye.